Have you ever wondered what happened to the actors who vanished from Hollywood's spotlight? Some of the biggest stars walked away from the glitz and glamour to seek a life far from the cameras. But what drove them to make such a dramatic change? Hollywood has always been home to the world's most famous faces, but not every star chooses to stay. In this video, we'll explore 20 actors who left the fame, fortune, and flashing lights of Hollywood behind to start completely new lives. From seeking peace in private life to finding passion in entirely different careers, their reasons are as intriguing as their on-screen legacies. So, let's dive into the stories of these former icons and discover where they are now. You might be surprised by the paths they've chosen. Number 1. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly is one of the most iconic figures in Hollywood, known for her stunning beauty and graceful demeanor. After making a name for herself in films like Rear Window, 1954, and To Catch a Thief, 1955, Kelly's life took an unexpected turn when she married Prince Rainier III of Monaco in 1956. Kelly retired from acting at the height of her career to embrace her new role as Princess of Monaco. Her departure from Hollywood was both shocking and romantic, and she dedicated herself to her royal duties, humanitarian work, and raising her children. Grace Kelly's story remains a symbol of a fairy tale come true, leaving behind the glitter of Hollywood for a life of service and elegance. What led to Grace Kelly's decision to leave Hollywood, and how did her new life compare to her Hollywood fame? Number 2. Cary Grant. Cary Grant is known for his impeccable style and charisma, starring in classics like North by Northwest, 1959, and Charade, 1963. Despite his successful career, Grant grew disillusioned with Hollywood's demands and the pressures of being a leading man. He retired from acting in 1966 at the age of 62 and moved to Europe. Grant spent much of his later years traveling and focusing on his personal life, eventually becoming an accomplished pilot and public speaker. His decision to leave acting was influenced by a desire to escape the confines of Hollywood and live a more private life. Number 3. Bette Davis. Bette Davis was known for her fierce performances and intense dedication to her craft, earning multiple Academy Award nominations and winning 2. However, as she grew older, she found it increasingly difficult to find meaningful roles in Hollywood. In the 1960s, she decided to move to France, where she was still appreciated as a legendary figure in cinema. Davis lived out her later years in relative privacy, focusing on her personal life and charity work. Although her decision to leave Hollywood was driven by a lack of suitable roles, it also allowed her the freedom to live on her terms. How did Bette Davis feel about her decision to leave Hollywood? And did her time in France bring her peace? Number 4. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe's life was marked by both fame and struggle. Despite being one of the most famous actresses of the 1950s, Monroe found the pressures of Hollywood overwhelming. In 1962, after several years of battling personal issues, including her difficult relationships with studios and men, she retreated from Hollywood. Monroe moved into a modest home in Los Angeles, where she focused on her well-being. Tragically, she passed away before she could fully leave her Hollywood persona behind. However, her time outside of the spotlight was marked by an intense desire for normalcy and peace. Number 5. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth was once one of the most beloved actresses in Hollywood, known for her roles in films like Gilda, 1946, and CoverGirl, 1944. But by the late 1950s, Hayworth had grown disillusioned with the industry, and the personal toll of her marriages and financial struggles made her want to step away. She eventually retired to Spain, where she lived in relative isolation, far from the Hollywood spotlight. Her decision to leave Hollywood was motivated by a desire for a simpler life, and she spent her final years battling Alzheimer's disease. What prompted Rita Hayworth to leave Hollywood? And how did she spend her final years away from the public eye? Number 6. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur was known for her charming comedic roles in films like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, and You Can't Take It With You, 1938. By the 1940s, Arthur became increasingly frustrated with the Hollywood system, which she found to be intrusive and demanding. She retired from acting in 1953, at the height of her career, and moved to New York City. Arthur spent her later years teaching acting and living a quiet, private life. Her departure from Hollywood remains one of the more mysterious retirements in Hollywood history, as she walked away from fame seemingly at the peak of her career. Number 7. Olivia de Havilland. Olivia de Havilland was a beloved star of Hollywood's golden age, known for her roles in Gone with the Wind, 1939, and The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938. However, by the 1950s, de Havilland became frustrated with the limited roles offered to her and the demanding nature of the Hollywood studio system. After her infamous legal battle with Warner Brothers, she moved to Paris and spent much of her later life in Europe. De Havilland's decision to leave Hollywood was driven by her desire for more creative freedom, and she found great success in European films during her time abroad. How did Olivia de Havilland's career shift after leaving Hollywood, and what role did her legal battle play in her decision? Number 8. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson was one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors during the 1930s and 1940s, known for his tough guy roles in films like Little Caesar, 1931, and Key Largo, 1948. However, in the 1950s, Robinson found himself blacklisted during the McCarthy era due to his past associations with left-wing causes. After his career was temporarily derailed, Robinson moved to Europe and lived in Switzerland for the rest of his life. He embraced the slower pace of life in Europe and avoided the Hollywood scene entirely. Number 9. James Stewart. James Stewart is considered one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood, with a career spanning from the 1930s to the 1990s. After serving as a pilot in World War II, Stewart became more selective about the roles he took on. In the 1960s, he moved to Pennsylvania and spent much of his later years out of the public eye. Stewart's decision to leave Hollywood was largely driven by his desire for a quieter life, and he took on fewer acting projects in his later years. Despite his relative retirement from acting, Stewart remained an important figure in Hollywood until he died in 1997. How did James Stewart's personal life influence his decision to leave Hollywood, and did he ever return to the limelight? Number 10. Clara Bow. Clara Bow was the quintessential flapper of the 1920s and became a huge star in silent films. Known for her fiery spirit and sensuality, Bow starred in films like It, 1927, which made her a household name. However, Bow's personal life was marked by scandal, and the pressures of fame took a toll on her mental health. In 1933, she retired from acting and moved to California's San Fernando Valley, where she lived quietly away from the public eye. Bow's decision to leave Hollywood was influenced by both her desire for peace and the mental health challenges she faced as a result of her fame. Number 11. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman was one of the most internationally renowned actresses of the 1940s and 1950s, known for her roles in Casablanca, 1942, and Notorious, 1946. After a highly publicized affair with director Roberto Rossellini, Bergman found herself at odds with Hollywood's moral standards and was even blacklisted for a time. Despite the scandal, she continued to act in European films and eventually moved to Italy, where she spent much of her later years. Bergman's decision to leave Hollywood was influenced by her desire to escape the scrutiny of American society and pursue more artistic freedom. Number 12. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart was the epitome of the hard-boiled, no-nonsense leading man in films like Casablanca, 1942, and The Maltese Falcon, 1941. But by the 1950s, Bogart was becoming tired of the Hollywood system and sought more creative control over his projects. He moved to the East Coast, where he became involved in several theater productions and even co-founded his own production company. His decision to leave Hollywood was rooted in a desire for more creative freedom and a break from the pressures of fame. How did Humphrey Bogart find fulfillment after leaving Hollywood, and did he miss the movies that made him famous? Number 13. Loretta Young. Loretta Young was a popular star during the 1930s and 1940s, known for her beauty and dramatic range. After years of starring in major films, Young became disillusioned with the industry's treatment of women. In the 1950s, she left Hollywood and moved to Europe, where she lived in relative privacy. Young continued to appear on television, but chose to keep a low profile and focus on her family. Her decision to step away from Hollywood was influenced by a desire for a quieter, more meaningful life. Number 14. George Sanders. George Sanders was known for his smooth demeanor and roles in films like All About Eve, 1950, and The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1945. Despite his success in Hollywood, Sanders found himself increasingly disenchanted with the industry and the pressures of fame. In the 1960s, he left Hollywood for a new life in Europe, where he continued to act in films but remained largely out of the public eye. Sanders's decision to leave Hollywood was driven by a desire for a more peaceful life. Number 15. Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn was one of Hollywood's most legendary actresses, with a career that spanned over 6 decades. Despite her success, Hepburn was known for her independent spirit and reluctance to conform to Hollywood's expectations. In the 1970s, she retired from acting and moved to Connecticut, where she spent much of her remaining years. Hepburn's decision to leave Hollywood was driven by her desire for a more private, peaceful life, away from the Hollywood machine that had once defined her. How did Katharine Hepburn's decision to leave Hollywood reflect her personality, and did she ever miss the spotlight? Number 16. Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple was the ultimate child star of the 1930s, known for her infectious smile and roles in films like Bright Eyes, 1934, and Curly Top, 1935. As she grew older, her appeal as a child star began to fade, and after a brief return to films as an adult, Temple retired from acting in the early 1950s. She reinvented herself by entering the world of politics and diplomacy, becoming a U.S. ambassador to Ghana and later to Czechoslovakia. Temple's decision to leave Hollywood was largely motivated by her desire to do something more meaningful and make an impact in the world. Number 17. Richard Burton. Richard Burton was one of the most captivating and talented actors of his time, starring in films like Cleopatra, 1963, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, 1966. Despite his critical success, Burton became increasingly disillusioned with Hollywood's superficiality and the toll that fame took on his personal life. In the 1970s, he left Hollywood to focus on theater and live in the remote Welsh countryside with his family. Burton's retreat from Hollywood was driven by a desire for a quieter, more grounded existence, and his career shifted to the stage rather than the screen. What led Richard Burton to step away from Hollywood's glitz, and how did his life change after he left? Number 18. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was one of the brightest stars of the 1930s, known for her sultry looks and roles in films like Platinum Blonde, 1931, and Dinner at 8, 1933. However, Harlow's career was tragically cut short when she died of kidney failure in 1937 at just 26 years old. Before her untimely death, she had expressed dissatisfaction with Hollywood's demands and had taken breaks from her career. Harlow's departure from Hollywood was more personal than voluntary, as she had begun to withdraw from the intense pressures of fame and sought a more peaceful life. Number 19. Douglas Fairbanks Sr. Douglas Fairbanks Sr. was one of the founding fathers of Hollywood and an early action star, known for his swashbuckling roles in films like The Mark of Zorro, 1920, and Robin Hood, 1922. After dominating the silent film era, Fairbanks found the rise of talkies to be a challenge and eventually left Hollywood for a quieter life. He spent his later years in Europe, focusing on his personal life and philanthropy. Fairbanks' decision to step away from the movie industry was driven by his growing dissatisfaction with the changing nature of Hollywood and his desire to explore other passions. Number 20. Debbie Reynolds. Debbie Reynolds was one of the brightest and most beloved actresses of Hollywood's golden age, known for her roles in Singin' in the Rain, 1952, and The Unsinkable Molly Brown, 1964. After experiencing personal heartbreak, including the public scandal of her marriage to Eddie Fisher and the death of her daughter Carrie Fisher, Reynolds stepped away from Hollywood. She moved to Las Vegas, where she focused on her career in musical theater and became a well-known figure in the city's entertainment scene. Reynolds found a new chapter away from the movie industry, using her talents to thrive in a completely different arena. So what made these Hollywood legends walk away from everything they'd worked so hard for? Were they chasing peace, personal growth, or something else entirely? One thing's for sure, they'll never be forgotten. If you enjoyed uncovering these fascinating stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more insider secrets about Hollywood's brightest stars. Who knows what shocking story we'll uncover next?